Rain fell mercilessly on the streets of Baltimore that Wednesday night. The yellowish lights of Riverside Diner reflected in the puddles forming on the asphalt, creating a melancholic scene for anyone watching from outside. Inside the small restaurant, the atmosphere was cozy with the smell of fresh coffee and the murmur of scattered conversations among the few customers who defied the bad weather. Moving between the tables was Chelsea Morgan, a 28-year-old woman with brown hair tied in a messy bun and dark circles under her eyes that betrayed the fatigue of someone working 2 jobs to support a family. Chelsea wasn't just a waitress. She was a single mother who fought daily to give a decent life to her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. The salary from the restaurant, combined with the hours she dedicated as a nursing assistant at a local hospital, barely covered the rent for the small apartment where they lived, the monthly bills and the medicine Lily needed to control her asthma. The situation had worsened in recent weeks when the girls' school announced an increase in tuition, putting Chelsea in an even more desperate position. While cleaning one of the tables, Chelsea tried to push away thoughts about the eviction notice she had received the previous morning. She had only 2 weeks to get the overdue money or would be forced to leave the apartment. The tips that night were particularly low, and she wondered how she would feed Lily the next day, as the refrigerator at home was almost empty. The idea of failing as a mother constantly tormented her, feeding an endless cycle of anxiety and doubts about her own worth. The bell at the door rang, announcing the arrival of new customers. Chelsea looked up and felt her heart race when she recognized the figure entering. Gervonta Davis, the famous boxing champion, known not only for his powerful punches but also for his story of overcoming the tough streets of Baltimore, walked toward a discreet table at the back of the establishment, accompanied by 2 men who seemed to be part of his team. She had seen him in local news and on social media, but never expected to meet him in person, let alone at her workplace. A mix of nervousness and curiosity took hold of Chelsea as she adjusted her uniform and grabbed 3 menus. It wasn't uncommon for celebrities to occasionally appear at the Riverside, especially after important events in the city, but Gervonta Davis represented something different to her. They both came from the same poor neighborhood in Baltimore, and Chelsea had always admired how he had managed to overcome adversity to achieve success. With a genuine smile, she approached the table, not imagining that this casual encounter would completely change the course of her life. Gervonta Davis had just completed an exhausting training session at the local gym, preparing for his next fight, which would take place in less than a month. The stress of preparation and the expectations surrounding him weighed on his shoulders like an invisible cloak that few could perceive. Behind the public image of the fierce and confident fighter was a man who constantly sought to prove his worth, not only to the world but mainly to himself. On that rainy night, all he wanted was a quiet place to dine and temporarily escape the pressures of his career. The Riverside Diner wasn't a luxurious restaurant, but it held special meaning for Gervonta. As a child, he used to pass by the establishment's window, watching the families eating there, dreaming of the day when he could enter and order anything from the menu without worrying about the price. Now, even though he could frequent the most exclusive places in the city, he occasionally returned to the Riverside as a way to reconnect with his roots and remember the path he had traveled. When Chelsea approached to take their orders, Gervonta immediately noticed something familiar in her eyes, the same determined and tired look he saw in his own mother years ago. A woman fighting against circumstances, staying on her feet despite all adversities. He discreetly observed how she tried to hide the tremor in her hands while writing down the orders, how she smiled politely despite her evident exhaustion. Small details that would go unnoticed by most, but which told a story he knew very well. During dinner, Gervonta maintained an animated conversation with his companions, discussing strategies for the upcoming fight and commenting on possible future opponents. But his thoughts occasionally turned to Chelsea, who moved efficiently between tables, attending to everyone with the same attention and respect. At one point, he saw her discreetly take a medicine bottle from her pocket and quickly take a pill, leaning on the counter for a few seconds before returning to work. That scene awakened something inside him, a connection, a silent recognition of someone who, just as he had once been, was at the limit of her strength, but continued fighting. When it came time to ask for the bill, Gervonta had already made a decision. While his companions discussed where they would go next, he discreetly asked the manager for paper and a pen. With calculated movements so as not to draw attention, he wrote a brief message on the note and added something he knew would make a difference in that waitress's life. It wasn't just about money, it was about recognition, about extending a hand to someone who, like himself in the past, just needed an opportunity, a breather, a small victory to continue believing that better days would come. Chelsea couldn't believe it when she returned to the table and found it empty. Gervonta and his companions had left while she was in the kitchen, resolving an issue with another order. A pang of disappointment hit her, not for the loss of a potentially generous tip, but for the lost chance to personally thank someone who represented so much to the community where she grew up. Sighing, she began to clean the table, collecting the used plates and glasses, when her eyes caught a folded paper under one of the napkins. Curious, Chelsea opened the paper and felt her legs weaken when she saw what was written. It was a simple note with a message that read, "Keep fighting. Baltimore is proud of warriors like you." Below Gervonta Davis's signature was a number that at first she thought was a mistake, $10,000, an amount that might seem small to many, but for Chelsea represented the immediate solution to all her urgent problems. The payment of the overdue rent, Lily's medicines, the pending bills, everything could be resolved with that unexpected gesture. Tears began to stream down Chelsea's face before she could fully process what was happening. The restaurant manager, Malcolm Peterson, a middle-aged man with a kind heart who always tried to help his employees as much as he could, approached concerned when he saw her state. When Chelsea showed him the paper, Malcolm smiled, revealing that Gervonta had briefly spoken with him before leaving, asking for discretion and ensuring that the amount would actually be delivered to the waitress. It wasn't a joke or a mistake. It was a genuine act of generosity from someone who perfectly understood what it meant to fight daily for survival. The rest of the shift passed like a dream for Chelsea. She attended to the other tables automatically, her mind wandering between the immediate relief of being able to solve her financial problems and the disbelief at Gervonta's gesture. It wasn't just the money that moved her, but the recognition implicit in his message. Keep fighting. 3 simple words that validated all her efforts, all the sleepless nights, all the sacrifices made for Lily's sake. Someone had noticed her silent struggle, and that someone knew exactly the value of not giving up. When Chelsea finally arrived home after picking up Lily from the neighbor who cared for her during her night shifts, she hugged her daughter with an intensity that surprised the girl. Sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of improvised hot chocolate, Chelsea told her daughter about the miracle that had happened that night. With bright eyes, Lily listened attentively to the story about the famous boxer who had recognized the warrior her mother was. "See, Mummy, I always said you're a superhero," said Lily with the innocence and wisdom that only children possess, making Chelsea cry again, this time with a smile on her face and a spark of renewed hope in her heart. By the next morning, the story of Gervonta Davis's generosity was already circulating among the Riverside Diner staff. Malcolm had been discreet as promised, but in a small environment like that, it was difficult to keep secrets for long. Chelsea arrived for her morning shift, greeted by curious looks and complicit smiles from her colleagues. Although part of her wished to keep what happened private, another part felt proud and grateful to be able to share how someone who had grown up in the same tough streets as her had extended a hand in a moment of need. The day proceeded normally, with the usual flow of customers coming in for breakfast and lunch. Chelsea attended to the tables with renewed energy. The weight she carried on her shoulders significantly lightened. During her break, she took the opportunity to call the apartment owner and settle the overdue rent payment, feeling a wave of relief when she heard she wouldn't be evicted. Next, she called Lily's school, ensuring that the tuition would be paid in full the following week. Small victories that combined represented a new beginning. In the late afternoon, as Chelsea prepared to end her shift and head to her second job at the hospital, a reporter from a local station entered the restaurant. Apparently someone had leaked the story to the press, And now she wanted to interview the waitress who had received the generous tip from the famous boxer. Malcolm, noticing Chelsea's discomfort, promptly intervened, explaining to the reporter that the employee valued her privacy and wasn't interested in media exposure. The reporter insisted, mentioning how the story could inspire other people, but Malcolm remained firm, protecting Chelsea from unwanted attention. Grateful for the manager's intervention, Chelsea managed to discreetly leave through the back of the restaurant. As she walked to the bus stop, she reflected on how her life had changed in less than 24 hours. The constant feeling of despair that accompanied her had transformed into a cautious hope for the future. She thought of Gervonta Davis, how he probably had no idea of the profound impact his gesture would have. It wasn't just about the money, though this solved immediate problems, but about the message that came with it. The validation that her effort was seen, that her struggle mattered. Arriving at the hospital for her night shift as a nursing assistant, Chelsea was greeted by her supervisor, Nancy Wilson, an energetic woman in her early 50s who always supported her team. Nancy immediately noticed the change in Chelsea's posture, the slight smile that occasionally appeared on her lips as she performed her tasks. During a quiet moment, Chelsea shared with Nancy what had happened, feeling comfortable enough to confide in someone who had always shown genuine concern for her well-being. Nancy listened attentively, her eyes shining with a mixture of emotion and what seemed to be an idea forming in her experienced mind. 3 days had passed since the encounter with Gervonta Davis, and Chelsea's life was beginning to take a new direction. With the tip money, she had managed not only to resolve her most urgent financial issues, but also to buy new medicine for Lily and even a pair of sneakers the girl needed for physical education classes. The feeling of being able to provide these small things for her daughter without the crushing weight of guilt and constant worry was indescribable. For the first time in months, Chelsea slept through an entire night without waking up distressed about how she would pay the bills. At the hospital, Nancy had called Chelsea for a private conversation. The supervisor explained that she was impressed with the dedication and professionalism that Chelsea always demonstrated, despite her personal difficulties. There was an opening for a nursing training program, sponsored by the hospital itself, that would allow Chelsea to study while continuing to work, with flexible hours and a small financial aid. It was an opportunity that could completely transform her professional future, giving her the chance to become a registered nurse and significantly increase her income. Chelsea was momentarily speechless at the proposal. Becoming a nurse had always been her dream, interrupted when she became pregnant with Lily while still young and had to abandon her studies to work. Nancy explained that normally there would be a rigorous selection process, but she was willing to personally recommend Chelsea, based on her exemplary record as an assistant. All Chelsea needed to do was fill out the necessary documentation and commit to the program, which would begin the following month. With tears in her eyes, Chelsea accepted the opportunity, feeling as if the universe was finally conspiring in her favor. That same night, while Chelsea worked at the hospital, a security camera video from the Riverside Diner began circulating on social media. Someone had leaked the footage of the moment she found the note left by Gervonta Davis and her emotional reaction. The video, although captured from a distance and without audio, clearly showed the impact of the gesture on Chelsea's life. Within hours, thousands of people had shared the images, many adding comments about how the boxer, often portrayed by the media only for his skills in the ring or occasional controversies, had a human and generous side that was rarely highlighted. The repercussion of the video reached unexpected proportions, eventually reaching Gervonta Davis himself. Sitting in his hotel room, mentally preparing for another day of intense training, he watched the images of Chelsea finding his note and breaking into tears. The scene deeply affected him, bringing up memories of his own mother and the difficulties she had faced raising him in an environment of poverty and violence. That anonymous waitress, whose silent struggle he had instinctively recognized, now had a face and a story that resonated with his own journey. Overcome by a sudden need to know more about the woman he had helped, Gervonta called Calvin Ford, his longtime trainer and mentor. Calvin wasn't just the man who had transformed him into a world boxing champion. He was a father figure who had always encouraged him to use his platform and resources to make a difference in the community. "I need to know who this woman is. Calvin, I need to be sure she's really okay," said Gervonta, his voice revealing a genuine concern that went beyond the initial gesture. Calvin, understanding the importance of that moment for his pupil, promised to find out more information about Chelsea Morgan, the waitress whose life had been transformed by a spontaneous act of generosity. The video of Chelsea reacting to Gervonta Davis's tip continued to gain views and shares. Local journalists began to look for her, eager to transform that moment into an inspiring story for their audiences. Malcolm, noticing the growing media interest, decided to take measures to protect his employee. After consulting with Chelsea, he issued a brief statement on behalf of the restaurant, thanking people for their interest, but asking for respect for the waitress's privacy, who did not wish for media exposure. Malcolm's protective gesture only increased public curiosity, but ensured that Chelsea could continue her routine without external interference. Meanwhile, Calvin Ford had managed to gather information about Chelsea through contacts in the Baltimore community. He discovered that she was a single mother of a 6-year-old girl who suffered from asthma, worked 2 jobs to support the family, and had recently been accepted into a nursing training program. The profile of struggle and determination impressed Calvin, who saw in Chelsea the same resilient spirit he sought to cultivate in his young boxers. As he shared this information with Gervonta, the trainer noticed how the fighter listened attentively to each detail, genuinely interested in the woman's story. After a long conversation with Calvin, Gervonta made a decision. He didn't just want to have made an isolated gesture. He wanted to ensure that Chelsea had the opportunity to rebuild her life in a sustainable way. Through his lawyer, he established an educational fund for Lily, ensuring that the girl would have her studies secured through college. Additionally, he made an anonymous donation to the hospital's nursing training program, specifically designated to assist single mothers seeking to advance their careers in healthcare. These were discreet actions, without seeking public recognition, driven by the sincere desire to make a difference in the life of someone who fought daily against the same adversities he knew so well. In her apartment, unaware of Gervonta Davis's movements, Chelsea prepared dinner for Lily, while reviewing introductory materials Nancy had provided for the nursing program. The small living room, previously a space where worries and unpaid bills dominated the atmosphere, now breathed possibilities. On the refrigerator, a new drawing by Lily showed 2 figures: a woman wearing a nurse's uniform identified as Mommy, and a smiling girl by her side. It was Lily's vision of the future, a future that now seemed much more attainable thanks to a sequence of events that had begun with an unexpected gesture of generosity. The phone rang, interrupting Chelsea's studies. It was Nancy, her hospital supervisor, with surprising news. An anonymous donation had been made to the nursing training program, creating specific scholarships for single mothers. As a result, Chelsea would not only have her tuition covered, but would also receive a monthly stipend that would allow her to reduce her workload to focus on her studies. "It's as if someone is specifically looking out for you, Chelsea," commented Nancy, without knowing how close to the truth she was. Hanging up the phone, Chelsea sat on the small sofa, absorbing the news with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. The series of positive events over the past few days seemed unreal, as if the universe was compensating all at once for all the years of struggle and hardship. 2 weeks had passed, and Chelsea and Lily's life was beginning to find a new balance. With the reduction in her workload, Chelsea was able to spend more time with her daughter, accompanying her to school and participating more actively in her daily activities. The improvement in quality of life was visible not only in the apartment, now stocked with healthy food and necessary medications, but mainly in Chelsea's more relaxed countenance and Lily's more frequent smile. The worries hadn't completely disappeared. Chelsea was still cautious with expenses and maintained strict control of her budget. But the crushing pressure that had previously suffocated her had given way to a prudent confidence in the future. The Riverside Diner, the routine was gradually returning to normal. The buzz about the video had diminished, and Chelsea could work without the constant feeling of being watched. On a particularly busy morning, while attending to a table of regular customers, she noticed the entrance of an older man with a serious appearance and erect posture, who sat alone in a discreet corner of the restaurant. There was something familiar about him, although Chelsea couldn't identify precisely what. When she approached to take his order, the man looked at her with an intensity that made her hesitate momentarily. "You're Chelsea Morgan, correct?" asked the man, his deep voice contrasting with the gentleness in his gaze. When she confirmed, he introduced himself as Calvin Ford, identifying himself as Gervonta Davis's trainer. Chelsea's heart raced upon hearing that name, bringing back the emotion of that rainy night that had changed her life. Calvin explained that he was there at Gervonta's request, who wanted to know how she and her daughter were doing after that encounter at the restaurant. The genuine concern surprised Chelsea, who didn't expect the boxer to even remember her after so many days. During breakfast, Chelsea shared with Calvin the positive changes in her life, the acceptance into the nursing program, the scholarship that had allowed her to reduce her workload, the improvement in Lily's health with regular access to necessary medications. Calvin listened attentively, occasionally asking questions about her plans for the future. When Chelsea mentioned the anonymous educational fund established for Lily, she noticed a slight smile on the trainer's face, as if he knew more than he was revealing. "Gervonta would be happy to know that you're moving forward, continuing your fight," commented Calvin, intentionally using the same words the boxer had written in his note. At the end of the conversation, Calvin handed Chelsea an envelope. Inside were 2 tickets to Gervonta Davis's next fight, which would take place in Baltimore the following week, with access to the locker room after the event. "He would like to meet the Warrior's daughter from Baltimore," said Calvin with a warm smile, using the nickname Gervonta had given Chelsea upon learning more about her story. The opportunity to personally thank the man who had initiated that cascade of positive changes in her life deeply moved Chelsea. More than the tickets themselves, it was the continued recognition of her journey, the respect for her daily struggle, that touched her heart. As Calvin said goodbye, promising to see her on the night of the fight, Chelsea felt a new sensation growing inside her, the certainty that, regardless of the challenges that might still come, she was no longer alone in her battle. The Baltimore arena was completely packed on the night of the fight. The air vibrated with the energy of the crowd, anxious to see their local hero defend his title once again. Seated in privileged places near the ring, Chelsea and Lily absorbed the electrifying atmosphere with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was the first time they had watched a boxing match live, and the experience was overwhelming in its intensity. Lily, wearing a t-shirt with Gervonta Davis's name that they had bought at the entrance, couldn't contain her enthusiasm, constantly asking questions about the sport and the fighter who had helped her mother. When Gervonta Davis finally entered the arena, accompanied by Calvin Ford and his team, the crowd exploded in applause and shouts of support. Chelsea observed the boxer walk confidently to the ring, his concentrated expression revealing total focus on the challenge ahead. It was difficult to reconcile that imposing figure with the man who had perceived her silent struggle and extended a hand when she needed it most. The fight itself was intense and technical, with Gervonta demonstrating why he was considered one of the best pugilists in his category. Each precise movement, each calculated blow reflected years of disciplined training and an unwavering determination that Chelsea recognized and admired. After the unanimous decision victory, Chelsea and Lily were led to the locker room by a member of Gervonta's team, as arranged. The space was busy, with journalists, sponsors, and members of the Athletic Commission circulating among the team members who discreetly celebrated another successful title defense. Calvin spotted them and came to meet them, guiding them through the crowd to a more private space where Gervonta, already recovered from the physical effort of the fight, was talking with some assistant trainers. When the boxer saw Chelsea and Lily approaching, his face lit up with a genuine smile that contrasted with the fierce image he projected in the ring. The meeting was brief, but deeply meaningful for everyone involved. Chelsea finally had the opportunity to personally thank Gervonta, expressing how his gesture had triggered a series of positive changes in her life. Lily, initially shy, soon loosened up when she perceived the gentleness with which the champion treated her, animatedly telling about school and how her mother now studied to become a nurse. Gervonta listened attentively to every word, genuinely interested in the stories of that small family. In a touching moment, he knelt down to be at Lily's height and gave her his fight gloves, specially autographed for her. "So you remember that, just like your mother, you too can be a champion in life," he said, with a sincerity that moved everyone present. Before saying goodbye, Gervonta shared with Chelsea something that few people knew. His own mother had worked as a waitress in Baltimore when he was a child, facing similar difficulties to raise her children alone. "When I saw you in that restaurant, I saw my mother years ago," he confessed, explaining why he had felt an immediate connection to her story. That revelation gave new meaning to the initial gesture, transforming it from an act of charity to an expression of solidarity and recognition between people who shared similar life experiences, despite their paths having taken such different directions. Leaving the arena that night, with Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, Chelsea reflected on the unexpected journey of the past few months. What had begun as an ordinary night of work at the Riverside Diner had transformed into a turning point in her life, not only for the material benefits, but mainly for the renewed faith in herself and her capabilities. The message that Gervonta Davis had left in that note, "Keep fighting, Bees," had become a personal mantra, a daily reminder that her persistence was seen and valued. As she entered the taxi that would take them home, Chelsea smiled, thinking that, in her own arena of life, she too was becoming a champion, not with gloves and precise blows, but with unwavering determination and a heart willing to never give up, regardless of the challenges that the future might still hold. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories.